Imagine you're sitting in a room. No phone, no music, no TV, just you and the silence. How long before you reach for your phone? How long before you start talking to yourself, humming, or finding any excuse to fill that quiet? For most people, it's less than 2 minutes. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about where you are mentally, because silence doesn't make strong people uncomfortable. Silence makes weak people panic. And today on Stoic Code, we're going to talk about why, and more importantly, what that panic is actually trying to tell you about yourself. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might change the way you think about noise, distraction, and the life you've been building or avoiding building. If this is your first time here, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because Stoic Code is where we break down the kind of mental strength that most people are too afraid to build. Let's start with something that happened over 2,000 years ago. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, emperor of Rome, would wake up every single morning and sit in silence before doing anything else, not to meditate in the way we think of it today, not to manifest or visualize success. He sat in silence because he understood something that the average person in his time, and in our time, completely misses. He understood that the noise around you is not neutral. Every sound, every conversation, every distraction you invite into your mind is either building you or breaking you. And if you can't sit with silence, if you physically feel uncomfortable when things go quiet, then something inside you is broken, not beyond repair, but broken. And here's what makes this so interesting. We live in the loudest era in human history, not just in terms of physical sound, though that's true too, but in terms of mental noise. The average person today consumes more information in a single day than someone living in the 1500s would consume in their entire lifetime. Think about that. Every morning you wake up and before your feet even hit the floor, you're already drowning in notifications, headlines, opinions, arguments, highlights, and updates. You've handed your mind over to the world before you've even had a chance to think one original thought of your own. And the crazy part, most people call this being connected, being informed. But what it actually is, and I want you to really hear this, what it actually is fear. It is pure, unprocessed fear of what you might find if you just stopped for a moment and listened to yourself. Because here's the truth that nobody in the noise business wants you to know. The reason silence feels unbearable to so many people is not because silence is empty. It's because silence is full. Silence is full of every thought you've been running from, every regret you haven't dealt with, every dream you gave up on but never officially buried, every relationship that's slowly going wrong that you keep pretending is fine, every question about your own life that you don't have an answer to yet. The noise, the scrolling, the music, the podcasts, the constant stimulation, it's not entertainment. For most people, it's medication. It's a drug they use to keep those thoughts from surfacing. And just like any drug, the more you use it, the more you need it. And the less able you become to function without it. Now I want you to think about someone you know who you'd describe as truly strong. Not physically strong, emotionally, mentally strong. Someone who stays calm when everyone else panics. Someone who makes clear decisions under pressure. Someone who doesn't need constant validation or entertainment to feel okay. I guarantee you, that person has a relationship with silence that most people don't understand. Because mental strength doesn't come from having the right playlist. It doesn't come from motivational videos or morning routines filled with noise. It comes from the ability to sit with yourself in the quiet and not fall apart. The ancient Stoics had a concept they called the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it extensively. The idea was that inside every person, there is a fortress, a space that is completely yours, completely protected, completely untouchable by the chaos of the outside world. But here's the part that most people skip over when they read about this concept. That fortress doesn't build itself. You have to build it. And you can only build it in silence. You can only build it when you stop running from your own mind and start actually working with it. Every time you choose distraction over silence, you're not just wasting time. You're leaving the walls of your inner citadel unbuilt. And when the real storms of life come, and they always come, you have nothing to shelter behind. Think about what happens to most people when they go through a serious crisis. A breakup, a job loss, a health scare, a death. The people who fall completely apart, who can't sleep, can't think, can't function, those are almost always the same people who spent years filling every quiet moment with noise. Because they never built the ability to be alone with themselves in a healthy way. They never developed the mental muscle that you only develop in silence. And then when life forces silence on them, when suddenly the distraction isn't enough and the thoughts flood in, they have no tools to handle it. They panic. They make impulsive decisions. They reach out to the wrong people, say the wrong things, do the wrong things. All because they never learned how to just sit still and think. Now contrast that with someone who has developed a genuine relationship with silence. When a crisis hits, they go quiet. People around them might even think something is wrong with them. Why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they talking? Why do they seem so calm? But what's actually happening is that they have a place to go inside themselves. They've built that fortress. They know how to process, how to think, how to separate emotion from decision, how to find clarity in the middle of chaos. And that's not magic. That's not a personality type they were born with. That is a skill. That is something that was built deliberately, through practice, and a huge part of that practice is learning to be comfortable in silence. Here at Stoic Code, we talk a lot about the gap between who you are right now and who you're capable of becoming. And one of the clearest indicators of where someone is in that gap is their relationship with silence, not their productivity, not their achievements, not how many books they've read or how early they wake up, but whether they can sit alone in a quiet room and feel okay about themselves, because that one thing, that one ability, tells you more about a person's inner world than almost anything else. Let's get really specific for a moment, because I think it's important to understand exactly what's happening in your brain when silence makes you panic. When you sit in silence, especially if you're not used to it, your brain doesn't just go quiet with you, it gets louder. The default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on a specific external task, starts firing. And what does it produce? Thoughts, memories, fears, fantasies, plans, regrets. Your brain basically starts doing a systems check, pulling up every file it has been putting off processing. For someone who is comfortable with silence, this is actually a beautiful thing. It's where creativity comes from. It's where self-awareness grows. It's where real problem-solving happens. Not the surface-level kind you do while you're distracted, but the deep, honest kind that actually leads somewhere. But for someone who is not used to silence, this process feels terrifying. Because the files that come up are the ones they've been avoiding the longest. And when they start to surface, the natural reaction is to slam the laptop shut, reach for the phone, turn on the TV, put on the earphones, do anything to stop the process. And the tragic irony is that by stopping the process, they guarantee that those files never get processed. They guarantee that the same fears, the same insecurities, the same unresolved issues will keep surfacing every time they get quiet, and keep driving them back to noise. It becomes a cycle that never ends. And the person becomes someone who literally cannot be alone with themselves, which is, when you think about it, one of the saddest ways to live, because you are the one person you will spend every single second of your life with. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, you are always there. You can never escape yourself. And if you are afraid of that person, if the sound of your own thoughts makes you reach for your phone in a panic, then what does that tell you about the relationship you have with yourself? What does that tell you about how safe it feels to live inside your own mind? And this is where the Stoic perspective becomes so important, because the Stoics were obsessed with self-knowledge, not as a feel-good exercise, not as therapy, but as a tactical necessity. They understood that if you don't know yourself, if you can't look clearly at your own thoughts, motivations, fears, and desires, then you are going to make bad decisions. You are going to be manipulated by other people and by circumstances. You are going to react instead of respond. You are going to live a life that was shaped by external pressure rather than internal intention. Epictetus, one of the most powerful Stoic teachers who ever lived, was born a slave. He had nothing. He had no freedom, no property, no power over his external circumstances. And yet he became one of the most mentally free human beings in recorded history. Why? Because he mastered the inner world. He spent enormous amounts of time in reflection, in silence, examining his own thoughts, questioning his own assumptions, separating what he could control from what he couldn't. And what he found in that silence wasn't depression or anxiety. He found freedom. He found a kind of peace that no one could take from him, because it didn't depend on anything outside of him. That is exactly what silence can do for you. Not the absence of sound, that's just a physical state. I'm talking about the practice of silence as a deliberate, intentional act of self-examination. The practice of actually stopping the noise, sitting down with yourself, and asking the honest questions. What do I actually think about my life right now? Am I moving in the direction I want to be moving? What am I afraid of? And is that fear based on something real? What have I been avoiding? And what would happen if I stopped avoiding it? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that strong people ask, and they are questions that can only be asked, and honestly answered, in silence. Now let's talk about something that I think is really underestimated in conversations about silence, and that's the connection between silence and creativity. Every major thinker, artist, writer, scientist, entrepreneur, every person who has produced something genuinely original and valuable in this world has talked about the role of silence and solitude in their creative process. Einstein walked alone for hours in silence. Darwin had his thinking path. A Roti walked every day in near total quiet. Nikola Tesla spent long periods in isolation and described his best ideas as arriving in a sudden flash of clarity that only came when everything else went still. This is not a coincidence. This is not a personality quirk. This is how the human brain actually works. Creativity doesn't happen in the noise. Creativity happens in the gaps between the noise, and if you never create those gaps, if every moment is filled with input, then there is literally no space for original thought. Think about the last truly original idea you had, not something you heard from a podcast or saw on social media, not someone else's idea that you borrowed. An original thought, a new connection between things, a sudden realization. Where were you? I'd bet money you weren't in the middle of a conversation, or scrolling through your phone, or watching something. You were probably in the shower, or going for a walk, or lying in bed in that quiet space before sleep. Because those are the moments when your brain gets a chance to do what it's actually designed to do, to synthesize, to connect, to create. And those moments of quiet are more valuable than any information you could be consuming instead. Here's something that might make you a little uncomfortable, and I want you to sit with it rather than dismiss it. The amount of time you spend trying to fill silence is directly proportional to how much you are struggling with yourself. This is not a judgment. It's actually a very useful piece of information, because it gives you a real, honest measurement. Not how productive you feel, not how motivated you are, not how many goals you've set, but something simpler and more honest. Can you sit in silence for 15 minutes without reaching for a distraction? If the honest answer is no, then that is your starting point. Not as a place of shame, but as a place of growth. Because every great journey starts with an honest look at where you actually are. The Stoic Code approach to this is not about forcing yourself to meditate for an hour every day or going on some kind of silent retreat. It's about starting small and being honest about what comes up when you do. Start with 5 minutes, sit in a chair, no phone, no music, no background noise, and just let whatever comes up come up. Don't fight it, don't analyze it too hard, just notice what thoughts surface. Notice how quickly your mind tries to pull you toward distraction. Notice the specific flavors of discomfort that arise. Is it boredom, anxiety, sadness, restlessness? Because those feelings are not the enemy. Those feelings are information. And the fact that you can sit there and notice them without running away is already a form of strength that most people never develop. Over time, and this is the part that people don't talk about enough, over time, the silence stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a resource. The thoughts that used to scare you start to feel manageable, not because they've changed, but because you've built the capacity to hold them. You've trained the part of your mind that says, I can handle this. And once that happens, you start to see something remarkable. You start to notice that almost everything you were running from was not as big as it felt in the dark. The fears that drove you to noise, when you actually look at them clearly, in the light of your own steady attention, most of them shrink, not all of them. Some are real and need to be dealt with. But the weight of them becomes something you can carry, rather than something that carries you. And this is where we get to what I think is the deepest point in this entire conversation. Because we started by saying that silence makes weak people panic, and that's true. But what actually makes them weak isn't some character flaw or some permanent limitation. What makes them weak is that they've never had to face themselves. They've been so good at running from their own minds that they've accidentally starved the very part of themselves that could make them strong. The part that only develops when you stop moving long enough to actually inhabit your own life. And here is the most important thing I want you to take away from everything we've talked about today. The world will never stop being loud. In fact, it's only going to get louder. More notifications, more content, more noise designed specifically to capture your attention and never let it go. The people who will thrive in that world, the people who will stay clear-headed, make good decisions, build real things, and maintain genuine peace in the middle of the chaos, are not the ones with the best productivity system or the most information. They are the ones who have built a relationship with silence, the ones who have developed the capacity to go inward to find clarity there, and to act from that clarity rather than from fear or impulse. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and I want you to really hear this, that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that power over your mind, it is built in silence, not in the accumulation of information, not in constant stimulation, not in the endless noise of the modern world. It is built in the quiet moments when you choose to stop running and start listening to yourself, to your actual thoughts, to the part of you that knows what you need and where you need to go. So the next time silence makes you uncomfortable, don't reach for your phone. Don't turn on the music. Instead, treat it as a training session. Treat it as an opportunity to build something that cannot be bought, cannot be downloaded, and cannot be given to you by anyone else. The inner fortress that the Stoics talked about. The mental strength that makes you unshakable. The clarity that makes you trustworthy to yourself. It starts with silence. It always starts with silence. Now I want to ask you something directly, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments below. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for more than 10 minutes? No phone, no music, nothing. And what happened when you did? What came up for you? I ask because I read every comment on Stoic Code, and the conversations in the comment section here are some of the most honest and meaningful ones I've seen anywhere online. So drop your answer below. And if this video resonated with you, if something here hit you in a way that made you stop and think, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not to be motivational, but because genuinely, the people in your life who are drowning in noise right now might not even know they're drowning. And sometimes one video, one idea, one moment of clarity is enough to change the direction someone is heading. Share it and let it do that work. This is Stoic Code. Stay strong, stay silent, and keep building.